He said it like it wasn't the first time he'd thought about it. Like he'd been waiting for me to break. I remember the way he looked at me when he said it, like he already knew how this night would end. Like part of him had always known. And maybe, if I'm being honest, part of me had always known too. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have a response, but because I was afraid mine would sound too much like surrender. There are these moments, quiet, small, seemingly innocent, where everything shifts. Not with a bang. Not with fireworks. But with a whisper, with a glance, with someone standing just a little too close. This wasn't the night we fell into something wrong. This was the night something already inside of me finally came to the surface. And what made it worse, or maybe what made it beautiful, was that he saw it. And didn't look away. Brief pause. Piano holds a minor note. The rain softens. Narrator, softening, a little more personal. Before we begin. If you've ever been caught between right and wrong and stayed. If you've ever sat with your own silence longer than you should have. If you've ever tried to do the right thing while secretly wondering what the real thing even was, then this story might be for you. And if you've been here before, welcome back to Passionate Tales Unfold. This isn't a story about infidelity in the way most people think. It's about connection. And what happens when someone you weren't supposed to need ends up being the only one who sees you. So sit back. Let the rain settle. Let the light flicker just enough to blur the lines. Because this is the night. Everything changed after my stepson helped me unexpectedly. And I still don't know what part of me it healed. Or ruined. But I remember every second of it. The room smelled like sandalwood and faint citrus. I just lit the candle he gave me for my birthday last month. It shouldn't have meant anything. But somehow it did. It was one of those little things, a gift you tell yourself doesn't matter. Because it's easier than admitting it might. The flame flickered against the wall, casting these long, golden shadows across the living room. The TV was still on, but muted. Something was playing, I couldn't even tell you what. Just movement, color, soundless noise, trying to fill a space that felt too quiet. I was wearing that old, soft cotton sweater, the gray one that's been washed so many times it barely has a shape anymore. It hung off my collarbone like it didn't belong to me anymore. And maybe I didn't feel like I belonged in that moment either. The dishwasher hummed in the kitchen steady, low, like a lullaby for someone who doesn't sleep much anymore. The rain, once heavy, was now just tapping gently at the windows like it had worn itself out trying to be heard. There was this ache in the silence. Not a dramatic kind of loneliness. Just a quiet one. The kind that hums in the background of your life. The kind you don't even realize has a voice until everything else goes still. I pulled my knees up onto the couch. Blanket tucked under my chin. Phone in hand. Scrolling without really seeing. Photo after photo, family vacations, birthday dinners, forced smiles. And then, there it was. A photo of him. Of Eli. Candid. He was laughing at something off camera, his eyes squinting a little in that way he does when he's really laughing. His mouth open, head slightly tilted back. Completely unaware. Unposed. And I stopped. Just stared. I told myself it was just nostalgia. Just a nice picture. Just a moment. But something pulled at my chest. Tightened the space between my ribs. I lingered. Longer than I should have. And I felt it, this strange, electric kind of tension in my breath. Like my body remembered something before my mind could catch up. I told myself not to overthink it. I told myself to keep scrolling. But I didn't. I just sat there, holding a photo of a smile that shouldn't have made me feel so much. And suddenly, the house felt colder. Or maybe I just felt more aware of how empty it really was. My husband was gone. Again. Another business trip. Another week of silence punctuated by meaningless check-ins and forced I love yous. But that night, it wasn't his absence I felt the most. It was Eli's presence in that photo. His energy still somehow lingering in the room, even though he wasn't anywhere near it. And I couldn't stop wondering why. There was a knock at the door. Not loud. Just soft. Like whoever was standing there didn't want to wake the house. Didn't want to wake me, really. I hesitated. Not out of fear, but because something told me right there, in that pause, that this was going to be a moment I wouldn't forget. I opened the door, and there he was. Eli. He looked different. Taller, maybe. Older. Or maybe it wasn't the way he looked. Maybe it was the way I was seeing him. His hair was damp from the rain, curls clinging to his forehead. His hoodie was dark with water, sleeves pushed up to his elbows like always. And his eyes, those soft, stormy gray eyes, held something in them I couldn't quite name. He smiled, just a little. That sideways one he does when he's unsure. And then he said, "I saw the light on. Mind if I come in?" I should have said no. I know that. But I didn't. I stepped back, just enough for him to come through. And he did quietly. No umbrella. No explanation. Just him. We sat in the living room. Same couch. Same soft cotton blanket still wrapped around me. He didn't say much at first. Neither did I. He glanced at the candle burning on the table. The one he gave me. Smiled to himself, but didn't mention it. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick. Heavy with something neither of us wanted to touch yet. Then he looked at me, really looked, and said, "You're cold." It wasn't a question. More like an observation. One he didn't wait for me to confirm. He stood, walked over to the armchair, grabbed the throw blanket draped across it. Held it for a second like he was asking permission without asking. I didn't say anything, didn't move, didn't stop him. He leaned in just enough and draped it gently across my shoulders. Barely touched me. But still, I felt the heat of him, felt it through the air between us, felt it in the way my skin rose beneath the brush of fabric. He sat down beside me. Not close, but not far. Close enough to feel his presence like a second heartbeat. And then, just like that, he asked about my day. Not in the way most people do. Not out of politeness. Not out of obligation. He asked like he wanted to know. Like it mattered. Like I mattered. I told him the truth. That it was a regular day. Laundry. A late lunch. Emails. Empty hours. But somehow the way he listened made all of it feel like it meant something. He didn't interrupt. Didn't check his phone. Didn't look away once. I caught myself watching him watch me. Noticing the quiet focus in his eyes. The way he leaned forward slightly whenever I spoke. Like he didn't want to miss a single word. And there was this ache growing inside me, slow, careful, persistent. Not for his touch. Not yet. But for the way he made me feel seen. I didn't know what to call it. Didn't know if I was allowed to name it. All I knew was, no one had looked at me like that in a long, long time. And I didn't want it to end. He glanced down for a moment, then looked back at me almost shy. "Hey, do you mind helping me look for something?" I blinked. Not because I was confused, but because I wasn't expecting anything to break the stillness between us. "In the garage," he added, rubbing the back of his neck. "Something Dad left behind." He didn't explain what. Didn't need to. I nodded before I thought too hard about it. Got up slowly, the blanket sliding from my shoulders. We moved quietly down the hallway. The floors creaked beneath our steps. Just once. Enough to remind us we weren't supposed to be walking like this, so gently, so deliberately, side by side in the dark. The candle's scent followed me as we left the living room behind. Sandalwood and citrus trailing like a memory you weren't ready to let go of. When he opened the garage door, the air changed. Immediately. Cooler. Darker. The sharp smell of old boxes, motor oil, and time that had settled into cardboard and metal. But somehow, I could breathe better there. Like the weight in my chest had space now. He flicked on a single overhead light. It buzzed before it steadied. The glow was soft, almost golden, barely enough to fill the room, but just enough to make us feel like we weren't entirely in shadow. We rummaged together, slowly. Not talking. Just existing. Side by side. He opened boxes carefully, like they held more than just stuff. Like they held people. And in a way they did. I watched him pull out an old photo album. Leather bound, edges worn. He held it like it might fall apart in his hands. He opened the cover. His breath caught. And I saw it. Her handwriting. His mother's. Delicate cursive. Ink slightly faded. A note written on the inside cover. For Eli, when you're old enough to understand. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The way his jaw tightened. The way his eyes lingered on that line, unmoving. I felt the shift inside him. I stepped closer. Only a little. My hand moved before I could talk myself out of it. Softly, quietly. I placed it on his shoulder. Tentative. Unsure. Like I was testing the air between us. And he leaned into it. No hesitation. His back pressed just slightly into my palm. Like he was letting himself be held by that single touch. It wasn't a moment you could explain. Not to anyone else. But inside that dim garage, surrounded by years of forgotten things, it felt like the only real thing in the world. His silence said more than words could. And my stillness, my choice to stay, said everything I wasn't ready to say aloud. We stood there, both of us holding onto something we couldn't name. Him with the album. Me with him. And, for that one long moment, the past, the present, and everything we weren't supposed to feel. It all blurred together. And I didn't want to step away. We went back inside. The hallway felt longer this time. Or maybe slower. Like the air had thickened somehow, like the moment in the garage had followed us in, clinging to our skin like humidity. He carried the album like it was breakable. Set it gently on the kitchen island. We didn't turn the overhead light on. Just the one above the stove, soft, amber, barely enough to see by. But enough to feel by. We sat beside each other again. Close. But not too close. And we opened it. Page by page. Old photos. Dusty smiles. Unspoken history. There was one of me and his father at our wedding. My hand in his. My smile younger. Less tired. I saw myself through Eli's eyes. Not just in the picture. But now sitting here. I wondered if he saw the difference. If he saw what had faded. He didn't comment. Just turned the page slowly. And then, there it was. A photo from a beach trip we'd taken years ago. Just me and him. He was maybe 16 then. I'd forgotten about it. But the moment it surfaced, I remembered everything. He had built this crooked sandcastle. Kept trying to fix the sides every time the tide came in. I'd been laughing, my hair a mess from the wind, my sunglasses too big. We were both sunburned. And we looked happy. Real. He didn't say anything. Didn't have to. Because the way he looked at that photo, it was like it meant more than it should have. More than he could explain. More than I was ready to hear. His eyes didn't move. But his breath did. Just one slow exhale. Like something in him was giving up the fight to keep it in. I looked at him then. Really looked. And I thought about his mother. About how she used to laugh like wind chimes in the spring. How she'd left behind so many echoes, but not enough answers. I thought about all the spaces I'd tried to fill. All the boundaries I'd promised myself I wouldn't cross. And still, there we were. Two people sitting in the glow of a half-forgotten kitchen light. Looking at a picture that shouldn't have felt dangerous. But did. The silence got heavy again. Not awkward. Just waiting. Then he looked at me. And his voice was quiet, but steady. You've always been the only one who saw me. It hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was romantic. But because it was true. I remembered every time he came home from school with silent eyes. Every time he hovered at the edge of the living room like he wanted to speak, but never did. Every quiet dinner. Every almost conversation. And I remembered how I'd always noticed. How I'd always tried. But I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My hand started moving before my mouth could. I stood. Walked to the stove. Reached for the kettle. My fingers trembled just slightly. Not enough for him to ask. But enough for me to feel it. The click of the stove knob sounded louder than it should have. I stared at the flame, watched it bloom blue and steady. I focused on that because I couldn't focus on him. Not right then. Because what do you say to someone when they tell you they feel seen? By the one person they were never supposed to need that from? I wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. So I let the silence stay. And I let the kettle heat. And inside my chest, something waited, too. The kettle whistled. Not sharply. Just a soft, rising note like it didn't want to disturb too much. I poured the water slowly. Let the steam curl up and touch my face. Watched the tea leaves unfold like they were waking from something too long asleep. 2 cups. Always 2, though I usually only made 1. I placed his cup in front of him. My hand brushed his, not by mistake. Not this time. Deliberate. Slow. And he didn't pull away. Neither did I. It was barely a second. The kind of moment that could have been passed off as nothing. As accidental. As just one of those things. But it wasn't. We both knew. The contact lingered just long enough to become something else. A spark tucked behind stillness. I sat across from him. The tea untouched. Both of us too aware of our hands, our breath, the space between our knees beneath the table. He didn't look away. Not once. And I couldn't seem to find a place in the room to rest my eyes that didn't lead back to him. He noticed everything. He always had. He stood slowly. Didn't say anything at first. Just took 1 step closer. And then, quietly, so softly, I almost missed it, he said. You can still ask me to leave. His voice didn't ask for permission. But it didn't challenge me either. It was an offering. A door left open. He was giving me the choice I no longer trusted myself to make. I should have said something. Anything. But my breath caught. Right there. Between the back of my throat and the pit of my stomach. Somewhere between apology and ache. And still, I didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't exhale. Didn't say no. Because the truth was, I didn't want him to go. Not really. Not anymore. He stepped closer again. Only inches now. His hand reached down. Not to grab. Not to hold. Just to brush against mine. Like he was asking with skin instead of words. And again. Nothing more. No pressure. No pulling. Just that faint, trembling brush. A line drawn in warmth. And in that fragile, flickering second, everything I'd been holding in. Everything I thought I'd buried. Every lonely night. Every silent dinner. Every unanswered need. It all rose to the surface like breath held too long. I looked up at him. And he just waited. Like the next move didn't belong to him. Like he'd already made peace with whatever came next. But I hadn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about desire. This was about being seen. Being chosen. Being wanted not for what I was supposed to be, but for who I'd become in all my quiet unraveling. And when his fingers touched mine again. No urgency, no assumption. I let them stay. Just stay. We stayed like that. Fingers brushing. Not holding. Not yet. Just touching in that in-between space. Where permission doesn't need words. And silence says more than speaking ever could. The tea had gone cold. Neither of us moved to drink it. The room felt like it was holding its breath with us. Like even the shadows along the kitchen walls were listening. Then he spoke. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. You know, I never forgot that night. I didn't know which night he meant. There had been many. So I tilted my head, curious. He gave me that soft, lopsided smile. The one he used to hide when he was younger. That night I had those nightmares. After Mom passed. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't breathe, really. And you sat beside me. Didn't say anything, just stayed. I remembered then. How small he looked in that bed. The way his fingers gripped the blanket like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. I'd stayed until he finally drifted off. My hand resting near his, just close enough for him to feel but not fear. It had felt like nothing at the time. A quiet gesture. Something a mother figure should do. But to him, it had been everything. He looked at me now with the kind of depth that made my skin flush beneath his gaze. Not because it was hungry, but because it was full of memory, of gratitude, of something else that didn't yet have a name. He reached out again, but this time not for my hand. His fingertips found my wrist. Soft, deliberate, reverent. The kind of touch that doesn't ask for anything, just offers itself. Like, here I am. If you want to feel something real again, I'm here. I didn't move, didn't flinch. The warmth from that small touch traveled up my arm like a slow burn. Not fire, no. Something gentler, like light through thin curtains at dawn. I didn't mean to lean into him. It just happened. My head found his shoulder, naturally. And he didn't shift away, didn't stiffen. He exhaled. One long, slow breath, like he'd been holding it for years and finally let it go. I felt the weight of it leave him, and somehow it softened me too. No kiss, no rush, just stillness. Like the space between our bodies had filled with everything we never said over the years. Every shared glance at family dinners. Every kind word spoken across a hallway. Every moment when something almost began but was buried instead. I felt my chest rise against his side. Not in panic, but in surrender. Not to him, but to the quiet understanding settling between us. His fingers stayed at my wrist, like an anchor. And we sat like that. Two people no longer pretending the bond between them was just coincidence. No longer pretending the years had erased anything. No longer pretending at all. Time slowed, not just around us, but inside me, like something had finally stopped spinning. I closed my eyes. It wasn't romantic. Not really. It wasn't maternal either. It was something else. Something quieter. Something that didn't need a name to be real. It didn't ask anything of me. Didn't try to fit into a box labeled right or wrong. It just was. Heavy in the air. Soft across my skin. Familiar and strange at the same time. His arm somehow, without me noticing, had moved gently around my back. Not gripping. Not claiming. Just there. A presence. Like a warm coat thrown around you when you didn't realize you were cold. And I didn't tense. Didn't move to adjust. Didn't question. I just let it be. Let him be. There's a kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace, but from surrender. Not to a person. Not even to a moment. To yourself. To the part of you that's tired of pretending not to feel. That's tired of needing permission to ache. To need. To want. I breathed. Deeply. Deeper than I had in weeks. Maybe months. It filled me. The air. The quiet. The closeness. And in that breath, there was no guilt. No obligation. No checklist of what this meant. Just a woman. In a kitchen with a boy who had become a man. Leaning into the only thing that had felt honest in a long, long time. The sound of the rain returned. Not hard. Not chaotic. Just steady. Comforting. Like it knew something had shifted inside the walls of that house. Like it had been waiting, too. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But I didn't. Because there was nothing to mourn. Only something to finally accept. That connection isn't always clean. Isn't always timed right. Isn't always easy to explain. But when it finds you, when it wraps itself around your bones in the quiet of an ordinary night, you know it's real. And maybe that's all it ever needed to be. Real. I let my head rest heavier on his shoulder. Not to get closer, but to stop holding myself up. He didn't move. Didn't breathe too loud. He just stayed. And I stayed. And nothing else in the world asked anything more of us. I woke up on the couch. The blanket still around me, like it had never been moved. It wasn't until I sat up that I saw the note. In his handwriting. Small. Simple. But it held more weight than I expected. Didn't want to wake you. You looked peaceful. Call me if you need anything. I read it twice. Maybe more. There was no explanation. No words for what had happened. Just that. And yet, it felt like the most honest thing anyone had ever written to me. Like he understood. Understood that sometimes the biggest shifts in our lives don't come with grand gestures. They don't announce themselves with fireworks. They happen in the silence. In the things we don't say out loud. In the things we simply let happen. I stared at the note, my chest tight, smiling through the ache. The ache that didn't feel like pain anymore, but like growth. Like something had cracked open inside me that I didn't know I'd been hiding for years. I sat there for a long while, letting everything settle. The soft sound of rain still outside. The distant hum of the house. Everything had changed after that night. Not in the way people think. Not in the way you'd expect, if you were standing on the outside. It wasn't a clean break. It wasn't a moment of clarity where everything was suddenly right or wrong. It was just different. It was the way I carried myself. The way I didn't feel so small anymore. The way I began to understand that someone like him could see me. Truly see me again. And that was enough. I ran my fingers over the note one more time. Then I whispered his name just once. Eli. It was soft. Barely audible. But it felt like a confession, a release. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know what would come of this moment. But I knew one thing. Everything had shifted. In the quietest of ways. In the way we're all so often afraid to acknowledge. And maybe that's how real change happens. When you stop pretending to know exactly what it all means. And just let it be. Sometimes, the people who change us are the ones we're told not to feel too much for. But what if feeling is the only honest thing left? Pause. I want to hear from you. Tell me, what did you think of that moment? When she didn't pull away. When everything in her might have told her to walk away. But she didn't. What did that moment mean to you? I read every comment, every thought you share. Because this isn't just my story. It's ours. So, let's unfold the next tale together. Passionate tales unfold.